Hi there, education fans. My name is Sieva Kaczynski, founder of Study Soup. We're passionate about education, so we're bringing you educators and influencers so you can learn about the education space. Today, we're joined by Vicki Davis, who's a full-time teacher in Camilla, Georgia, and author of the Cool Cat Teacher blog, which I'm a big fan of. She's won awards for online projects Connecting the World, and is the author of Reinventing Writing and co-authoring of Flattening the Classroom, Engaging Minds. Last week, Mashable named her one of 10 rockstar teachers on Twitter. That's huge. Congratulations, Vicki.
Thanks.
It's great. Thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
So what's going on with you? What are you doing these days? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm still a full-time teacher. I'll finish up my 13th year this year. I teach grades 8, 9, and 10. Of course, writing the blog. My current global collaborative projects are a project called Gamified with some friends in Alaska and Canada, and my students are studying serious games in 9th grade and 10th grade. We're studying physics of the future, so collaboration and technology are very important parts of what I teach here at Westwood. So my focus is my students, even though I do all this other stuff. It's a blessing to be part of the education community with all of that and to share.
Okay. A lot of things going on for you. Writing books, leading the revolution on Twitter. I love it. So tell us a little bit about the flattening of the classrooms. Tell us what that is and what is going on in this new movement.
Well, if you could picture a classroom with the walls, flattening the classrooms means you can remove the walls and you can merge your classroom with other classrooms around the world. You can connect, you can collaborate, you can use a wiki and write and research together. You can use WeVideo to do videos together and co-create movies. You can do so much co-creation. So flattening the classroom is this movement to really merge classrooms where instead of students having partners sitting next to them, they have partners all over the world, and it's really a movement of teachers that's gaining steam. I mean, it's happening at all levels, from kindergarten and up. And I do it with my students just to kind of push the edge and say, what can you do? But for anybody to take credit for the movement would not be something you could do, because it's really, through social media and through Twitter, Facebook. That's why it's so important to build your PLN and to connect with others, because then that gives you opportunities to collaborate with others. When you meet a teacher on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, that you kind of just go, we're kindred spirits. We can do this together. You trust each other. That's the type of person that you want to collaborate with.
So connect the dots a little bit for us. You work primarily in K through 12. Is that right?
It is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how would higher ed partners work with K through 12 education in this new flattening model?
Well, in some previous projects I've worked with, Flat Classroom, NetGen, we've had classrooms like Dr. Lee Zeitz from the University of Northern Iowa to be expert advisors on the wiki or to connect as resources or to give advice. And that's a great way because they're getting teaching experience. The students are getting an audience as well as good advice. And a lot of times they don't even realize that they're teachers, which is very powerful when teachers see it happen because they start interacting. And it's really just co-learners in that space. With Gamified, my 9th graders are studying serious games, but they're going to use a framework developed by Dr. Lee Graham at the University of Alaska. I think it's Southwest. I always get it confused, but she's in Juneau. And they're developing the framework that the kids are going to use to analyze the serious games based upon how they think that serious games should be analyzed in education. So it's a very cutting edge symbiotic relationship that we're still experimenting with. But I think that when you flatten the classroom, you can work with anybody, anywhere, anytime. And there's all kinds of relationships and tandem learning experiences that we can create. And the IRB process, the process for getting research approved, is going to have to change so that educators and students can be collaborators in all kinds of creative, exciting ways.
So it sounds like we're flattening the classroom, we're removing some walls, increasing connections in between both learners as well as educators. What are some of the challenges that you see to research in higher education in this new century with things like social media and all the connections that we have. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. The interesting thing, Sieva, and you get on Twitter, so you know this. You see all the PhD students tweeting out links to their surveys for their doctoral thesis. And it's a new day for research. And there's all kinds of ethical things and validating who people are and a whole litany of issues that researchers have. Back several years ago when Dr. Craig Union researched our Horizon project, which turned into the NetGen project, he had all kinds of review issues because a lot of the people that he worked with had never seen something like that before. You mean you have kids in Australia and China and the U.S. and how do we do this? How does this work in terms of approval? It's very new, it's very exciting, but it can be done for creative universities. And there's so much opportunity. If you look at what Dr. Jeff Stanzler has done out of the University of Michigan with his Arab-Israeli conflict simulation, he's teaching his teachers how to work with simulations in students. But then we've got students on the other end, real live students. So it's just a very kind of emerging field, but I think there's so much opportunity to use social media for research even, because there's a whole research project in just following the EdTech hashtag or the EdTech chat hashtag or EdChat. I mean, think about the research you could do on just one chat. I was part of the EdTech chat group with Tom Murray and all his friends 2 weeks ago, and there were almost 2,000 tweets about writing in education. What could you do with just that? You could write a book on that. So, all the issues that come with that, even writing the first book, Flattening Classrooms, Engaging Minds, was challenging because who do you have to get permission from for a tweet? I mean, a lot of that's been worked out now because it's 3 years later, but then it was challenging to do even from an authoring perspective. So these are things we have to talk about, and we should, and it takes pioneers like Dr. Graham to actually do it, to get people thinking, this is exciting and this is something we need to do.
Yeah, and that is very exciting. I can't imagine 2,000 tweets. It just went on for an hour or so.
It was just an hour, and there were people complaining, slow it down. But, it was because there were so many people who wanted to talk and that were excited about writing in education. My second book is Reinventing Writing, because I think that we've got all these writing tools and we've not really talked about how do we really reinvent writing in schools. And you've got all these kids taking pictures of the board for everything, but they can never find it again. So, I think that schools should have an official note-taking service. Are you going to be Evernote? Are you going to be OneNote? Those are really the two front runners now. And if you're a real heavy Microsoft school, you might want to go with OneNote because it's so robust. If you're real heavy whatever else, you probably want to go Evernote. But those are two great options. And what is our school-wide notebook service? That's the kind of stuff we should be talking about, and we're not yet, because we're reinventing paper and pencil. We're reinventing our notebooks. We're reinventing our filing cabinet. It's a cloud sync tool, So these are all the things that we need to talk about as education moves forward.
Yeah, and things are moving so quickly. Earlier you mentioned a Middle Eastern class that is also leveraging the power of video to engage with people that are on location, and that's just wild, because I was in school not so long ago, and that wasn't even an opportunity. We learned about something over there. And maybe kind of on that note, could you tell us about some of the resources or technologies that you yourself are using in your classrooms, maybe 2 or 3 of your highlights, things that have worked really well?
Well, I'm paperless as possible, and we are BYOD, bring your own device. So Dropbox is my best friend. I love Dropbox. We use Google Drive very heavily when the students are planning projects, when they're writing together. We did this big activity on Hour of Code and used something called Tinker to teach elementary kids how to code. And Tinker asked my students to write an article, so they're drafting that in Google Docs as we speak. It's amazing because they log in at home, all over the place. We use wikis very heavily. I'm a huge Wikispaces fan, and no, they don't pay me. I just have been using them a very long time. And I think wikis are a very important part of academics that every student should know how to use. I think this Wikipedia model, even if you don't like Wikipedia itself, is cropping up in things like Encyclopedia of Life and Ballotpedia and a lot of very useful places. So I think that's important. I'm a huge Evernote fan. You could not separate me from Evernote. I actually used it for 6 months, left it for 3 months, and I've been back for about a year and a half. I use it on everything. I couldn't live without it. So I actually do all my lesson planning on Evernote now, and I sync it and I share those lesson plan pages with my students. I'd like to go to a school-wide note-taking service. We're just trying to get that in the budget. So those are some of my essential things. But, I really want students, one advantage of a BYOD is troubleshooting is higher order thinking. I want my students to be able to take a document, convert a document, move it here, move it there. Here, oh, it's an MP3, convert it to a WAV, add it to a movie, convert the movie. I want them to be able to work on any platform, any place, any time within minutes of sitting down at that platform. And I think that's a realistic approach. The thing that bothers me is so many schools have cut technology out of their curriculum. I was talking to a school today, and their only requirement for technology is one semester, and you can use SAT prep as credit for your technology course because SAT prep is online. It's an online class, and that's just crazy. We've got so much to do. I have 2.5 years with every student here. I get a lot in. There's other things I don't get in, but programming, computer science, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, those are essential for their future. And I think every school should relook at their curriculum and relook at the graduation requirements for what they require to put more technology and science, technology, engineering, arts, and math that are kind of combined together.
Yeah, definitely. I see that as well. And kind of building off that note, you talked about the importance of technology, you talked about the importance of learning technology. Maybe tell us where you see the role of the teacher going. Maybe project the next 5 to 10 years. What is the teacher's role? It's obviously shifting quickly. You're a big player making it shift quickly. Tell us what the role of the teacher is in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, one thing to remember is some people, they came and I had some observers in my classroom today. And when they wanted to come, the one thing I wanted to encourage them to understand is that it's so not about the technology. It starts with the relationship with your students. Do they trust you? Do they love is a great word to use because that's how I feel about them. They know I love them. They know I care. They know I'm going to bring it every day. If you don't bring it, they don't bring it. I promise. Teenagers are tough. All ages are tough. I couldn't teach kindergartners, but that will not change. I don't care if my sister's an online professor for Savannah College of Art and Design and has won a lot of awards. She has the same relationship. So this idea of some remote computer that's just going to magically educate you without a human involved, without a relationship is not, I don't think, going to happen. I don't think it's even in massive MOOCs that scale up. I think you're going to have relationships there, at least between the students where they're co-teaching each other and they're working through that material together because we're social creatures by nature. So you can't socialize with a computer. Some people might think they can, but you can't. So that's not going to change. I see that right now people are no longer talking about if they should integrate technology, but how. So that's good. The thing that really bothers me is I was up in Virginia not too long ago, and those teachers were so frustrated and heartbroken. They said, Vicki, they've turned our computer labs into testing centers. We literally cannot book our computer lab because they're giving all the tests in the computer because we're becoming data-driven in a lot of schools. And there's some advantages to data-driven. The problem is you can't measure a student because they are not discrete. They are human beings. It's hard to measure students. So there's some things you can measure, but it's really hard to do that. So that's one kind of discouraging thing is if we don't get a handle on this testing, if we don't know what education needs to be, we're not going to know what we need to do. And I think in this country in particular, we don't know what we want education to be. And so we've got to get back to our roots of a good, strong work ethic and that sort of thing as we integrate technology. And we've got to know what we want to be. We want to be places where our students create. I think Genius Hour is a transformational approach where you make sure that every student in your school creates something new and original with technology 1 hour a week. I don't think it's too much to ask to have 1 hour a week creating and inventing in school. And schools that say they can't do that, I don't think I'd want my kid there, and I wouldn't want to be there because we should be creating and inventing original work. We need more creativity. And if you look at more developed countries like the United States, you need creation and invention and higher order thinking to be happening. So we'll see what happens. We've politicized education to the point that, and I don't want to get political because I try to stay apolitical. I like to focus on the things that helps all teachers. So I intentionally stay apolitical and want to help unite teachers. I don't care where you are, who you are. You know, my podcast is Every Classroom Matters. Your classroom matters. I want to focus on teaching. But technology is an important part of it. I think mobile learning is here. I think that Google Glass and wearable computing and even monitors on our contacts and such is part of life, and we have to get over it. And a lot of the same things people are saying about cell phones today, they said about calculators in the 70s. Kind of reminds me of the water boy, you know, calculators are the devil. That's what they were saying in the 70s. And now it's cell phones are the devil, you know, like the mom and the water boy. So I just think that we have to learn to peacefully coexist. And, you know, it's still about, are your students focused on what you're doing? Are they on task? Are they making eye contact? Are they with you? Are they bringing their attention and all their energy? There will never be a day where you can have a good teacher who sits at their desk and puts their feet on their desk and expects the kids to learn. That doesn't happen in the real world. So you need an engaged teacher. You do need access to technology. And I think all our schools should pretty much be engineered for BYOD, because even if you're one-to-one, whatever, Apple, Surface 2, you know, whatever it is, or Chromebook, you still got to have BYOD because you are BYOD, whether you realize it or not.
So you're pushing for the BYOD revolution. There's a lot of things happening here. Some schools are going all iPads, some are going Chromebook. You're the BYOD group.
Well, I'm BYOD because we don't have enough money to do the other. If I had all the money in the world, I might make another choice. I don't have a problem with BYOD because I think troubleshooting is part of 21st century living, and I want my students to troubleshoot. There are a lot of schools that don't have a lot of technology support, and they just say, oh, it's easier if we're just all of one thing. And I can see that perspective too. I think the secret is, do you have buy-in? Has the school formed a committee of people who are working together, who have a common vision together? And do you go forward with certainty and purpose? If you do that, I don't care what platform you use, as long as you're moving ahead and you're using technology, there's a space for all of this, and competitors typically make us stronger. I love it that Apple and Microsoft and Google and all of these companies are competing, because when you have that kind of competition, students win and education wins. And the thing they've got to do, that all these companies have to do, is I think that the app stores for education in pretty much every platform are a pitiful excuse for an education app store. The stuff you go in and you find as educational apps, you're kind of like, okay, who said this? And there's no feedback loop for the teachers. Teachers are having a really hard time of, okay, you created this. Now, how do I look at it? How do we share it with the class? How can I share it with our community? How can I get feedback on what you actually know? I mean, my son was playing a game 2 years ago, learning all the states. The only way I could know what states he didn't know was to watch him play the game. Well, why would I have him sit there and play that game for 30 minutes, which is supposed to teach him the states, if I have to watch him play for 30 minutes? Why not let him play for 30 minutes and have it say, email me, Mama, he doesn't know, you know, the capital of Pennsylvania and the capital of South Dakota, and you need to practice. And the apps, there's no feedback loop. So there's a whole lot of room for improvement, and we'll see who does it. But even those companies need to be multi-platform, because I think ultimately the one that wins are going to have the ones who have the best platform. For example, OneNote as a single app is the best note-taking because it's so intuitive. But the iPad app for OneNote is pretty doggone pitiful. It's awful. So if you're heavy on the Microsoft, you're probably going to want to go with OneNote. But Evernote also has the developer community and all the apps. They've got Sketch and they've got everything else. So, but on Surface RT, the Evernote Touch app is not worth much. I don't like the Evernote Touch app. I have a Surface Pro and I install the real Evernote to use that. So depending on, you know, I really think even with BYOD, you should say we are optimized for Google or Apple or Microsoft products, so that parents know what's going to work the best as we decide our note-taking services and our calendaring and all the other stuff we do.
You're right. It's awesome that there's so much competition out there. A lot of exciting things are happening in technology, and we'll make sure that our viewers watch and listen to your blog. So it's coolcatteacher.com. Where did that name come from, by the way? How did you come up with that? That's a
My students helped me. We're the Westwood Wildcats, and I was actually kind of despondent. I went to a conference and I learned about all this Web 2 stuff. I'd been teaching for 3 or 4 years, and I felt like a failure because I wasn't doing all this stuff in my classroom, and I thought I was the last teacher on the planet that was not teaching all this stuff. And so I knew I had to blog because I wanted to teach my students to blog, but I'm not going to teach them if I don't have it kind of under control first. So I was sitting here and I was saying, what should I call myself? And I have a marketing background, so I had 50. My rule with brainstorming is unless you have 50 ideas, don't pick. So I was sitting there brainstorming. They're like, well, Miss Vicki, you're pretty cool and we're the Wildcats. So why don't you be the cool cat teacher? And I was like, oh, yeah. It was my student, Casey. She's graduated now. She was in my first flat classroom project. And she kind of helped and some other students did. And that's my name. And my podcast name is Every Classroom Matters. If you look it up on iTunes, that's my other kind of passion. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, follow Vicki at her blog, coolcatteacher.com, and then definitely on Twitter at coolcatteacher. I was also part of the EdTech chat list or conversation that we had on Twitter. That was great, and I suggest that to all of our listeners. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us today, Vicki.
Thanks, Sieva.